Every month, I ask students on our Telegram channel about the questions they were asked in their Ielts speaking exams. I've analyzed all the topics from recent exams, and today I'd like to show you what topics and questions students get asked and how you can improve your answers to these questions to achieve a higher score. It's Asi here. Let's get started. Let's be original and begin with Ielts speaking part 1. At the very beginning, the examiner asks you several short questions to verify your identity. These include: what's your full name? Where are you from? What should I call you? These questions are always the same, and we've discussed them in depth in this video here, linked below. The introductory part is short. After that, you'll be asked questions on 3 topics. Here is our list of topics reported by students. So what can we learn from it? First of all, look at the top 3: home, hometown, work, or studies. These are the topics every student gets asked about at the beginning of their exam, right after the introduction. There is not much variety here. If your topic is home, the first question is: do you live in a house or a flat? And subsequent questions will depend on your answer. If it's your hometown, the examiner will say, let's talk about your hometown. Do you live in a city or a village? A hometown is a place where you were born or lived for a long time as a child. For instance, I've been living in London for 12 years, but my hometown is Almaty in Kazakhstan. If you lived in 2 or several different places, it's up to you to choose which one you want to talk about. If the topic is work or studies, the first question will be: do you work or study? These initial questions allow the examiner to ask you correct follow-up questions. Your answers to the first question should be relatively short, 1, 2, or maybe 3 sentences max. For example, do you live in a house or a flat? I could say, it's been about 2 months since I moved into a house. Before that, I had only lived in flats. Or for, do you work or study? I'm studying for my master's degree in civil engineering, and I'm really looking forward to graduating this summer. These initial answers don't have to be long, so don't feel like you have to start talking a lot because the examiner will probably just interrupt you. There will be other questions that require more extended answers. And although you can figure out what questions you're gonna get at the beginning of your exam, you definitely should not memorize your answers. You should practice, but make sure that your answers come across as natural and you speak with the same rhythm and intonation as you're gonna speak in the rest of your exam. Memorized answers are very easy to spot, and examiners won't award you any points for those. To encourage you to speak without a lot of previous preparation, some of the questions are likely to be less predictable. For example, if you work, you may be asked, what are your working hours? Or how do you travel to work? If it's about your hometown, what would you want to change about it? I guess you can already see how you can give longer answers. For example, I could say, I wish more could be done to improve the air quality in the city. Almaty is surrounded by beautiful mountains, but because it's so protected from the wind, and the population and the number of cars are growing fast, the air is becoming more and more polluted every year, particularly in winter. So this answer is a bit longer and uses slightly more complex vocabulary and grammar than our first answers. But generally, the first topic is to warm you up, to help you settle in. And then you're gonna be asked questions on 2 other topics. And here we have a much greater variety. Some classic topics have been used for years and continue to be used today. For instance, books, films, music, weekends, and wild animals. I was actually asked about this topic in one of my exams, and it caught me completely off guard because it felt like those questions were for small kids. So be prepared. Other topics are more unusual: advertisements, ambitions, bags, fixing things, geography, helping others, ice cream, maps, rain, and video games. Although students reported that they were asked about these topics in real exams, it doesn't mean that's what you're gonna get. Some questions get dropped and some come back. We see it clearly because topics we covered a couple of years ago are used again today. But the aim of this video is to show you the range so you know what to expect and not to predict topics for your test. So, what kind of questions can you expect? The first question to each topic is usually quite general. Let's talk about ambitions. Do you consider yourself an ambitious person? Here is a sample answer. Yes, I think I'm pretty ambitious. I mean, I always try to push myself to the limits in whatever I do. If you don't aim high, then you'll never realize your dreams. This answer is great because it shows some topic-specific vocabulary or words we specifically use to talk about ambitions. Here are some of them. To push yourself to the limits, to work very, very hard. To aim high is to be very ambitious and to try to be the best. To realize your dreams, to make your dreams a reality. And the second question usually tests a certain skill. For example, what did you want to be when you were younger? This question invites you to talk about the past. Or, where do you see yourself in 10 years? The future. These questions invite you to use certain grammatical structures in order to talk about the past and future. For example, a common mistake is mixing up the present perfect and past simple. Compare these. The question is the same. What did you want to be when you were younger? I've always dreamed of becoming a doctor. I dreamt of becoming a doctor. I used to dream of becoming a doctor. Can you feel the difference? Have dreamt is in the present perfect. This means that I'm either a doctor, starting to become a doctor, or still dreaming about it. For example, yes, I've always dreamt of becoming a doctor, and now I'm on the second year of my medical degree. I dreamt means you don't dream about it anymore. Similarly, I used to dream means that this is a past aspiration that is no longer true. Like in this answer. I used to dream of becoming a doctor when I was young, but in my late teens, I completely abandoned this idea when I realized how many years I would need to study and how tough it would be to work as a doctor in a hospital. In the answer to this simple question, there are several grammatical structures you can choose from, and examiners do check if you use them correctly. Coming back to our topics, one of the goals of these less common topics is to see the width of your vocabulary. Most test takers can talk about their day or their house, but can you talk about something like repairing things? Our question is, are you good at fixing things? This answer invites you to use some topic-specific vocabulary. Here is a model answer. I'm pretty good at repairing most things around the house. I'm good with my hands and I have a toolkit with all you need, screwdrivers and so on. So simple plumbing jobs like fixing a leaking tap or something similar I can do. But one thing I don't touch is electrics. Anything to do with wires scares me a lot. There are a lot of topic-related words in this answer, right? Let's have a look at them. A toolkit is a box containing tools for repairing or making things. A screwdriver is a tool used for turning or driving screws. Plumbing, that's the system required to supply water or heating, like pipes, boiler, radiators. Leaking. When water is dripping from a tap or a pipe, it's leaking. And a tap is where your water is coming from in the bathroom. Wires. Electrical wires conduct electricity. And we also have a couple of idiomatic phrases. You can say that someone is good with their hands if they're skillful. And one thing I don't touch. This means that's something I never do. But in our case, quite literally, it's better to never touch electrical wiring. This answer would definitely score high for lexical resource, even though it doesn't have any big complicated words. But it shows that the student can express thoughts with precision and natural control. This is a band 9 answer. Probably you don't know as many topic-specific words. But as long as you can talk about the subject freely enough, you should still be able to get a band 6, 7, or even 8. But if you do have some time before your exam, it's great to expand your vocabulary and practice your answers to common and less common topics. This particular answer is coming from our Ielts speaking library. This is a collection of sample answers and advanced vocabulary to over 40 topics used in real Ielts speaking exams. And it covers a number of topics from our today's list as well. I'll link it in the description. Okay, 5 minutes and 3 topics later, your part 1 is done. Now it's time for part 2. That's where the task says you should speak on a given topic between 1 and 2 minutes. But ideally, you should try to speak for the full 2 minutes until your time is up and the examiner stops you. What topics can you get here? It seems that most of them can be categorized into 3 groups. You may be asked to describe an object or a place. For example, describe a book you've read many times, an item of clothing you like wearing, a park or garden you like visiting, an invention you find useful, or a job you would like to do. And a topic that's been popular for a long time, a water sport you'd like to learn. The second group of topics is to describe a person. Describe someone you know who is successful in life. Or describe a friend from your childhood, or someone who recently moved to a new place. There are fewer topics here, but the most popular category among our replies was to describe an occasion or experience. For example, describe an occasion you heard someone complaining about something, or you had an interesting conversation with an elderly person, or your travel plans were cancelled, or you got lost. One of the common problems or fears that students have is that they won't know what to say or they will struggle to speak for long enough. How can we address those? Well, let me show you by looking at a topic that most of my students voted for as the most challenging. Describe a person who loves to grow plants. Here, it's important to read the topic carefully and think about what it actually asks you about. It's not asking you to describe how to grow plants. Yes, if you know some topic-specific vocabulary, it's great and you should definitely add it to your answer. But that's not the main purpose of the answer. The focus is on talking about a person. Have a look at the bullet points first. Who the person is, how you know this person. These 2 bullet points don't mention plants at all. Then there is one which asks about what type of plants he or she grows. But it doesn't tell you that you must go into a lot of detail. And the last bullet point is quite key. Explain why growing plants is important for this person. This last bullet point allows you to use more complex grammatical structures in your explanation, so you should always try to cover it. But overall, out of 4 bullet points, only 1 talks about plants directly. Sometimes, to find a good story to tell, you just need to reframe the question for yourself a little bit. In our case, what kind of plants can we talk about? This might be about houseplants or gardening, growing flowers or fruit and vegetables, planting trees or farming. For example, my mom loves growing orchids at home, and my friend's husband is a farmer. I could talk about either of them. One way to approach the task when you don't really know what to say is to describe each bullet point in a paragraph. That's exactly what we did in this sample answer. We have a paragraph about the person, my neighbor, then a little story about how I met him, a paragraph about what type of plants he grows. So, in this paragraph, there is indeed some topic specific vocabulary because this is a model answer. But if you don't know specific words, you could give a more general answer. After all, you don't need the maximum Ielts score to pass, right? So your answer doesn't have to be perfect. And the last paragraph is explaining why growing plants is important for him. I find that sometimes following those bullet points is an easy way to give a coherent answer, like in this case. If you'd like to read this answer, please pause the video now. In other cases, some of the bullet points may not help you. For example, if I chose to speak about my mom, I would hardly give a paragraph about how I met her, right? In this case, you can concentrate on telling the story and addressing the main question at the top. And as I mentioned before, also the last bullet point explain why. And if you manage to speak for 2 minutes, the examiner will stop you when your time is up. Don't worry if you don't finish the story. However, if you run out of things to say and there is a little bit of time left, the examiner may ask you 1 or 2 short follow-up questions at the end. For instance, would you like to start growing some plants yourself? These questions still belong to part 2. Your part 3 begins when the examiner tells you, now it's time for part 3. Indeed, it's time to talk about it. And arguably, this is the most important part of your exam. Ielts speaking part 3. Just like in part 1, the examiner will be asking you questions, and this part will last between 4 and 5 minutes. But there are some significant differences. First of all, the approach to questions is different. Questions will be somehow related to your part 2 topic. For example, if your part 2 was to describe an occasion when you borrowed something from a friend, then in part 3, the examiner will have 3 sets of questions in front of them. These might be sharing things, sharing feelings, and sharing intellectual property. Basically, sharing or not sharing valuable information between companies or governments. Unlike part 1, where examiners read questions from a list, in part 3, they formulate questions themselves. And in our example, talking about sharing things is easier than about copyright and intellectual property. So depending on your performance, examiners will choose 2 sets of questions for you. The easier set 1 and 2, or the more difficult 2 and 3. And before we look at some sample answers, here are the topics from part 3. As you can see, they are related to part 2, but take a more serious twist. A conversation with an elderly person may turn into questions about the retirement age and generation gap, or part 2 about parks into sustainability in agriculture and food waste. And students usually don't remember questions because they tend to be quite long. So if you'd like to read all the topics or save them by taking a print screen, pause the video now. Let's come back to our topic about sharing and check if you make this common mistake. The question is from the first set, the easier set. Is it important for children to share things with other people? And the answer is, think if it's a good answer. Yes, I think it's very important. When I was little, I had a friend who really didn't like to share her bicycle with me, but she always wanted me to share my toys with her, and so on. Was it a good answer? Not really. This is not the style of answer you should give in part 3. It would be okay in part 1 because part 1 is more personal. These are questions about your life and your experiences. Part 3 is more abstract. It's about general questions and problems. That's why in part 3, you should try to give more abstract answers about people in general instead of using yourself or your friends as examples. Here is one way to answer this question. Yes, I can think of some very good reasons why children should be taught how to share with others. It helps them show that possessions are not everything. For instance, if one kid has a toy and another one doesn't, then sharing that toy will be fun for both of them. And although they may not be aware of this, it builds friendship and trust. When you meet adults who haven't learned how to share, you can see how selfish they've become, and that can make their lives pretty miserable because nobody wants to spend time with someone selfish. Anyway, it's always much better and more effective to do things together. Have you noticed the length? Part 3 answers can be up to a minute long. If it's shorter, the examiner can also ask some follow-up questions to help you extend your answers. But try to do your part. What can you talk about? The examiner is looking for your ability to weigh pros and cons and provide reasoned arguments or opinions, using examples or evidence where appropriate. Let me show you how to use examples without making them personal. Our set 2 question about sharing feelings is: what problems does it cause when people aren't very good at sharing their feelings? Here is one way to answer. Yes, that's a difficult question. I mean, a lot of people in my country are not so good in this respect. They're not at all open, and that can give other people the wrong impression. If you don't say how you feel, how are others going to understand you? A lot of people are very shy and are afraid to express themselves. So they often give the impression that they're just not interested in what someone is saying. Or if you just keep all your feelings inside, there may be a moment when you just explode and say or do something you will regret. So it's important to manage your feelings properly. Okay, to avoid making your answers too personal, you can still take examples from people you know and generalize them. If the examiner thinks you're particularly strong and are likely to get a band 7, 8, or 9, they will ask you the most challenging questions from set 3. In our case, sharing intellectual property. Do you think it's important for scientists and companies to share their research? Here is my answer. Well, I suppose in theory, definitely yes. If we're talking about making things better and about scientific progress, then we should share knowledge. For example, if a pharmaceutical company makes an important breakthrough and produces a vaccine or medicine that saves lives, then it should be shared. We've just seen that. Of course, any kind of cooperation and sharing requires a lot of trust. Maybe in university research it's more open because academics do share their research through publications and conferences, while companies tend to keep their knowledge secret so they can make money out of what they call their intellectual property. Remember that the examiner is only interested in your use of English. not if your answer is factually correct or very profound. The IELTS speaking exam can indeed feel intense, with questions coming one after another. Some students have shared that examiners kept on interrupting them, which can be quite distracting and intimidating. However, in most cases, that's because examiners need to manage time. When preparing for your exam, practice with a timer to understand how long your answers should be. In my courses, students receive practice tests where questions are automatically timed, allowing them to learn the appropriate length for each answer. Of course, during the test, some answers can be longer and some shorter, but that's still very helpful. When the next question comes, it's important to switch immediately and leave the previous question unfinished. You can organize similar practice sessions for yourself at home using both classic topics and more challenging questions. You can download a PDF with questions only on our Telegram channel and questions with sample answers and vocabulary in our IELTS speaking library, both linked in the description. And if you'd like to learn some useful phrases to extend your Part 3 answers, watch this video here. Thank you so much for watching me today. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye!